Today's lesson is a little different. It's a lesson that I think actually Mark should probably give, because Mark gives these kinds of lessons awesome. And I struggle with this lesson. Most of you know we've been doing this series, I Love My Church. And we bought this whole church kit because it came with cool videos and it came with a great study guide that we could use. And it also came with 5 sermon outlines. And so I've been doing my best to stay within those outlines and stay close to them. But that means that the lesson today is a little different than what I would normally teach. I've fleshed out the ideas in their mind, but the lesson is just a little bit different. So we're going to start off with a simple question. What do superheroes and Christmas have in common, and what do they have to do with the church? And as we go throughout our lesson today, I know this is a strange question to ask, but that's what we're going to try to answer today when we talk about how I love my church. Because the implications to these questions and the implications to its answers are far-reaching and very important for us as a group. Superheroes and superpowers. Now, I'm sure if you were like most kids, when you were younger, you dreamed of having those kinds of powers, didn't you? Maybe you still dream of having those kinds of powers. Did you have a favorite superhero? I did. You know, it seems like I haven't seen that movie, Superman versus Batman. But I can't even imagine watching that movie because there is no comparison. Superman is Superman. Batman is a bat. I mean, how can there be any comparison between the two? One guy is super, the other guy pretends to be a bat. Now, I usually don't go to Webster's, but just for this lesson, I looked up the definition of superhero in Webster's. And here's what they have to say. A fictional hero having extraordinary or superhuman powers, an exceptionally skillful or successful person. Now, Merriam-Webster's job is to define things. And so I hate to criticize them or question what they write, but in this case, I don't think what they wrote is correct. It's not that it is inaccurate, it's just not complete. Superheroes are more than just extraordinary or superpowered. They are more than just exceptionally skilled people. That's not really even what makes them what they are. Superheroes are superheroes because they utilize their abilities within a specific context. You can't be a superhero if you don't do anything. You can have the greatest powers in the world, and if you sit at home watching all of the bad things happen on TV, you're not a superhero. It doesn't matter if you can fly or fight or shoot webbing out of your arms or have super strength. I guess he has a little device. He doesn't actually shoot him on his arm. Sorry, I'm just getting over a cold this week. It doesn't matter what powers you have. If you're not doing anything with them, all you are is someone sitting on a couch. And that is not a superpower. Leon Bloy wrote this. He said, any Christian who is not a hero is a pig. So those are some pretty strong words, aren't they? And that's a thought-provoking statement, I think. A thought-provoking quote for most of us. So we have to stop and ask ourselves, am I doing everything that I can with the gifts and talents that God has given me? If not, what does he say I am? A pig. If we're a follower of Jesus, we have to remember that we have been given superpowers. We can be superheroes. Your talent is God's gift to you. But what we do with our talent is our gift back to God. Now, I'm not saying, of course, that God has made it possible for us to use our powers to get rich and famous. Most of the time, that's not going to happen, is it? But a superhero is someone who utilizes their powers in a specific way, in a specific context. And that's what God requires or wants of us today. Part of loving our church is being the superhero within the church that God created us to be. God gave us you. You know, a lot of times when we come to church, we look at the gifts and talents of others. But God gave this church you. And that's an important thing to remember. You are part of a team. You are part of a community. In 1 Corinthians chapter 12, it starts off by reminding us that Paul is going to talk to us a little bit about our talents. He says, Now there are various gifts, but the same Spirit. And there are various ministries, and the same Lord. There are varieties of effects, but the same God, who works all things in all persons. But to each one is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. The part that I want us to focus on this morning is the part in verse 6. God who works all things in all persons. God empowers various talents and gifts in each of us. Sometimes we're given more than one, aren't we? And sometimes we struggle trying to figure out what our talent is, what our gift is. But the thing we need to remember in all of this is no matter what talent we have, no matter what gift we have, it is empowered by the Holy Spirit. It is not there to make us look good. It is not there to bless us. It is there to bless the community of believers that we are a part of. It is a superpower that only works if we get out and use it. One author wrote a list of gifts, and these may not be exhaustive, but he said our superpowers may be in giving or leadership or mercy or service or administration or discernment or faith or helping or knowledge or wisdom. All of those things are areas that we can be talented and gifted in. The thing that I think is so important for us to remember today is that God is the one that chose our power. In His grace, God has given us different gifts for doing certain things well. Never be lazy, but work hard and serve the Lord enthusiastically. Whatever talent we have, whatever gift we have, it has been given to us. It's important to realize that we didn't apply for these things. We didn't request them. We don't get to say, no, I want to be able to do what my mom does. It's not the way it works, is it? God in His infinite wisdom, in His love, in His care, and in His power knew exactly what talents best suited us. But more than what the best suited us, that's probably the wrong way to say it. He knew what talents best suited the community that we were going to be in, that we were going to be a part of. And He gave us those talents. Let's not waste our time being jealous of other people's talents. You know, we've talked about this before, but so often we focus on the things that we're not good at, and we try to improve our talents in those areas. Instead, let's focus on the things that we are good at, and let's use those talents to the benefit of the congregation. Forget about the things that you're bad at. Focus on the things that you're good at. S.D. Gordon writes this: "We have nothing to do with how much ability we've got or how little, but with what we do with what we have. The man with great talent is apt to be puffed up, and the man with little talent to belittle the little. Poor fools! God gives it much or little. Our part is to be faithful, doing the level best with every bit and scrap, and we will be if Jesus' Spirit controls." We have been given an amazing opportunity to be used by God. And that has to be exciting, but it's also confusing sometimes, especially when we struggle with trying to figure out what our talents are. Now, hopefully, by the time you're as old as most of us are, you've kind of figured out what your talent is, but maybe you haven't. But if you're still younger, you're still trying to figure out what your talent is. There are 3 ways I think that we can help discover what some of our talents are. Number 1, experiment in serving. Get involved. Try doing a lot of different things and do them to the best of your ability. You know, here we have a lot of different ministry groups that you can be a part of. We have our welcome committee who plans things and gets things ready over on the table, makes sure everyone feels welcome and is talked to, follows up after people leave. We need people to be involved. We have our advertising committee who designs all the nice, pretty things that we have, who figures out the way that we can best impact the community. We need more people there. We have the outreach committee that focuses on actually going out to the community and sharing, trying to figure out a way to share Christ. We have an in-reach committee, which focuses more on us just spending time with one another and developing the relationships that we have with one another. We have a sermon planning committee that talks about what would be the best direction for our lessons to help the congregation. We have a service committee for those who have needs in the congregation. There are a lot of ways to get involved. Experiment. Try. I can guarantee if you came to any of those committees and said, I want to be a part, nobody's going to say, no, we really have enough. We don't want you. We're going to say, of course we do. Volunteering is a pretty amazing thing. And I think we sometimes don't volunteer because we know somebody else will take care of it. You know, I sent out an email earlier this week because I'm going to be gone this week for study. And so I asked if anybody wanted to volunteer to lead study. I knew that I was going to need to make a phone call and say, hey, would you please do this? But I told Courtney right before church, congratulations! You were the first one to volunteer and the only one to volunteer. So you win. But we want people who will volunteer. We want people who will experiment in serving. Because that's one of the ways that we find out what areas we're talented in and are good at. The next is to ask others. Ask people who are close to you what your specific talent is. And when I say this, I mean ask honestly. You know how we often ask? We say, I'm really good at serving others, aren't I? That's not a way to ask the question. Ask, and don't argue with the answer when somebody gives it to you. If somebody says, you know, I think you're really good at blank, my tendency is to say, no, I'm not. The purpose of that, excuse me. The purpose of asking others is not so that we get a big head, not so that we try to figure out that we're good at a lot of things, but just so that we can figure out how God wants us to be used in this community. The next one is, it sounds kind of odd, but when you're doing the first part, when you're experimenting with different things and trying to serve and trying to do whatever it is, as you're doing those opportunities, ask yourself how you're feeling. You know, does going skating with everybody just make you exhausted even though you just sat at the table and visited? Or when you leave, do you feel energized and uplifted? If you're tired, if you're dreading the next opportunity, if you're not feeling a lot of passion, then that's probably not the area that you should be serving in. And this one is hard, especially for our group, because we are such a small group that we have to do a lot of things. And sometimes we serve in areas that we are not the most talented at. Sometimes we serve in areas where we are not the best. I know I probably shouldn't admit these kinds of things out loud, but that's why I'm glad that, like, Lori is doing the in-reach stuff. Because I love it when we get together, but the thought of planning a skating day, I'm not going to do that. That's kooky. Sorry, Lori. But people had a great time yesterday, didn't they? They had a good time. And it was exactly what we needed. And Lori, when she talks about those kinds of things, she starts smiling, her eyes light up. She's excited about planning the next thing that people will enjoy. That's what we need. If you're ready to go, if you're looking forward to the next opportunity, the next thing that you can do, then that's what you should be doing. Whatever our talents are though, it helps to remember that they are given to us by God. And I know I've gone over that like 5 times now. But I want us to remember that. Because they were given to us by Him, not for us, but for the community that we serve in, the group that is here. The talents are to benefit others, not us. In his book, The Pursuit of Excellence, Ted Engstrom wrote these words. He said, I was cleaning out a desk drawer when I found a flashlight that I hadn't used in over a year. I flipped the switch, and I wasn't surprised when it gave no light. I unscrewed it to get the batteries out, but they wouldn't budge. Finally, after some effort, they came loose, but what a mess. The battery acid had corroded the entire inside of the flashlight. The batteries were brand new when I put them in. The light had never been used. I had stored them in a nice, safe, warm place. But there was only one problem. The batteries were not made to be warm and comfortable. They were designed to be turned on. They were designed to be used. And he goes on and says, it's the same with us. We weren't created to be warm and safe and comfortable. You and I were made to be turned on, to put our love to work, to apply our patience in difficult, trying situations, to let our light shine. Our talents are a lot like exercise. You know, it would be nice if we could just exercise a couple of times and get in really good shape and it stayed that way, right? But we all know it doesn't work that way. Now I'm trying to remember if it was Brian I talked to. I think it was. We were talking about this. We're going on a trip. Tomorrow morning we're leaving early. And this year we're taking horses. And we're taking horses partially because Brian wants to carry everything up the mountain, including the kitchen sink. And partially because he knows that's the only way I'm getting up the mountain, is on a horse, because I would be dead. You know, a few years ago, I actually made it up the mountain. I had to stop a lot, but I made it up the mountain. So I was in good enough shape to make it up the mountain. But 5 years later, could I do it? No. What's really sad is you should see the horse that I ride up the mountain. The horse is in amazing shape, but there's like this white froth coming off its neck, and his tongue is hanging out. I'm so out of shape, I make the horse out of shape. But I think we understand the point, don't we? It doesn't matter how talented we were in the past, unless we're constantly using our talents for the benefit of the group, unless we are constantly working to better ourselves, we lose it. We have superpowers today. But one of the things that I want us to remember is that we are not alone. We have a superpower team. Now, I don't know how many of you enjoy or watch The Avengers, but one thing about The Avengers is there's not one person. There's a team of people. There's a group. They couldn't meet the specific needs of the earth alone. They all need one another. And that's God's plan for us as well. Let's notice what Romans chapter 12 has to say. For through the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you, not to think more highly of himself than he ought to think, but to think so as to have sound judgment, as God has allotted to each a measure of faith. For just as we have many members in one body, and all the members do not have the same function, so we who are many are one body in Christ, and individually members of one another. Since we have gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, each of us is to exercise them accordingly. If prophecy, according to the proportion of his faith. If service, in his serving. Or he who teaches, in his teaching. Or he who exhorts, in his exhortation. He who gives with liberality. He who leads with diligence. He who shows mercy with cheerfulness. Now I know that we all know this intellectually. But sometimes we forget. We need one another. Most of the time when we look at Hebrews 10 and 25, we focus on not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together. We focus on that verse and we say, be here, you're going to hell. So that's the implication at least, right? Maybe we don't actually come out and say that, but that's the implication. But what is the focus of that verse? Encouraging one another. Edifying one another. Building one another up. That is the focus of that verse. And that's why we do the things that we do. And that is why it is so important to remember that we are part of a team. Alone, we cannot handle a lot of the situations that come up. But together we can. And sometimes we just need a different perspective. Now, I know I've told you this before, but when I first started preaching, I still don't know what I'm doing most of the time, but I had really no idea what I was doing then. And there was a situation at a congregation where it was just a terrible, no good situation. I won't go into it, but it was a bad situation. And the congregation called me and they said, it's your job to go and talk to this person. I had already talked to them in the past. And so when the congregation told me to go and talk to them, I was angry. Not at the congregation, I was angry at that person for putting me in that situation. Here I've already gone and tried to deal with it and nothing happened. And so I'm having this conversation in my head. I've already figured out exactly what I'm going to say to them. But for some reason, I guess it probably was the Spirit, said, call one of your older men in the congregation and have him go with you. So I called this man and we drove up there together. And up there, the whole way, he was talking about his approach to the situation. And his approach was one of love, one of thoughtfulness, one of understanding. Mine was one of anger. We need one another. We need one another. I know we all know this, but I think one of the most important things to remember is that your talent and your gift was not given to you for you. It was not given to you so that you would look good. It was not given to you so that you could do a lot of good with it. It was given to you for the benefit of the congregation, for the benefit of those in the world. That's why you have it. The Bible teaches us that our talents are given to us, but they are given to us for others. Notice what 1 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 7 says. A spiritual gift is given to each of us as a means of helping the entire church. We need you. We need your gifts. Each member belongs to all of the others. You know, we often think about the relationship that we have with our spouse, right? The Bible tells us that our body is not our own, that it is theirs, and vice versa. But have you ever thought okay, I don't want this to go too weird, because I'm not saying your body, but, see, some things should not come out my mouth. But have you ever thought that in the same way, those same words can be about the church? Each member belongs to the others. Your talents are there to benefit me. And my talents are there to benefit you. We all benefit one another. Our gifts are not our own. And I think this should be a lesson in both humility for us, but also a lesson in responsibility for us. Humility because the gift is not about us, but responsibility because God knew that someone else would need our help. And He gave us the gifts to be able to take care of it. By binding together, by coming together as a group, we can meet the needs of individual members. And a lot of times it takes more than one person to meet someone else's needs, doesn't it? It takes 3 or 4 people to meet someone's need. The community needs you. The church needs you. This community around the church needs you. Not because they really need you, but because they need God. And they need God working through you. God in His wisdom, in His plan, has decided to empower us with the ability to serve one another and the world that's around us. I want you to just take a second. Imagine what this church would be like if everyone was using their gifts and talents to the fullest. I think we do a pretty good job here. But I've been to congregations where you look around and you see some amazingly talented men and women, some amazingly talented young people, but they're not using it. Not for the congregation, not for the community. Can you imagine what our community would be like, what our city would be like, if we were all serving in ways that utilize the gifts that God gave us. Now, our initial question was, what do superheroes and Christmas presents have to do with church? We talked a lot about superheroes, but not much about Christmas presents. And we're going to end with just a few ideas. But Chrissy's shaking her head, going, I don't understand how all of this goes along, and I can't believe you're talking about Christmas. Especially this time of year. But who doesn't enjoy opening Christmas presents? Can't imagine anybody who doesn't enjoy it. You know how ball humbug I am about most things, right? But if you bring me a Christmas present, I'm going to be happy and excited. And I think almost everybody is. Just look up. Oops, that's I don't know. I skipped a verse there. Just look at the face though of someone who's opening a Christmas present. This was many years ago. But how many of you, if someone handed you a Christmas present, would just go, shrug your shoulders and walk away? None of us would we? It doesn't matter how old and how jaded we are. Even if you're as old as whoever you think I was going to say there. You would never just turn around and walk away from a gift, would you? There would be something wrong with that. Everyone would think you were crazy. We don't leave gifts sitting there. We have been given some of the most amazing gifts by God. But often we do exactly that. God presents us a nice, beautiful bow-tie gift. We open it and we say, that's not the one I wanted. That's not the talent I wanted. You can keep it. And we turn around and walk away. I'm sure most of you remember the moment that Susan Boyle stepped out on stage on Britain's America, that'd be bad. Britain's Got Talent. If you saw the cameras panned the audience. People were rolling their eyes. People were laughing at her. They had not heard her. All they had done is seen her. She doesn't look like a superstar, does she? She doesn't look like someone who would be very talented. They made fun of her because her outward appearance was not glitz and glamour that they had come to expect. But when she began to sing, many people described her voice as a voice like the angels. People's initial attitudes about her would changed. They saw her voice as an amazing voice. And so they began to see her as an amazing person. Their rolling eyes changed to looks of shock and awe. And if you haven't seen it, I've encouraged you to go and watch some of the YouTube videos that are out there. Because you see people rolling their eyes and almost looking in disgust. I don't know a better way to say it. But almost looking in disgust at her. Like, how could you come on TV looking like that? But then that look of disgust begins to change into shock and awe. And the resounding applause proved to everyone that she had what it took to be a star. Her talent was on the inside. And I think our talents are not always the most visible things. God doesn't care if we have amazing hair. He loves us the way that we are. He doesn't care about so many things, but He cares what's on the inside. And He expects us to take our gift, to use it to honor Him. And our gifts may be weird. I remember one time I went back to a preacher study. And this is probably another thing I should admit. I'm not going to tell you his name. But there was a preacher who got up and he gave this lesson. And it was one of the most horrific things that I had ever listened to. And I leaned over to the person that I was studying with at the time, my mentor at the time. And I said, how did he become a preacher? Because I may not be very good, but compared to that? But you know what? Publicly, he was horrific. But one-on-one, I'm told he was one of the most amazing teachers that the church has ever had. And so sometimes our gifts are not always outwardly visible. Here's my final question for you today. Why did God give you to our church? Why did God give this community the gift of you? Was it because of your teaching, your leadership, your encouragement, your discernment? What is it that makes you superpowered? And why did God give us the gift of you? I would encourage you today to not let your gift go unused. Discover ways that we can utilize them. And be the best that you can be with your gift. The last sentence of the sermon illustration that they sent just said, be a hero for Jesus. I know that sounds a little cheesy, but I think it's good, isn't it? We've all been given some amazing gifts. But so often we look at them from the wrong perspective. We look at them and say, look at the gifts that I have. Not, look what God has given to me for you. That changes things immensely. Imagine that somebody gave you $10,000. Isn't it a lot different if you believe that $10,000 is yours versus somebody says, Dave, here's $10,000, but you have to spend it on Courtney? Doesn't that change things? And I think with the gifts, it's the same. A lot of times we look at the gifts and we're like, woo, look what I have. But what if, when God gave us the gift, He said, I'm giving you this gift of service, but you can only use it for those that you're sitting with. For me, that changes the way that I look at what God has given to us. And I pray that it does for you as well. We never want to close with that offering an invitation. If there's someone here who's never given your life over to Christ, we invite you to. Or if you have, but you need the prayers of your brothers and sisters in Christ, please come forward as we stand and sing number 605.